Hey, in this video, we're going to master conversion tracking for B2B SaaS and health tech companies. Conversion tracking is the backbone to any successful marketing campaign and initiative. Without it, you're essentially running blind in any of the marketing activities that you do. I've audited hundreds of B2B SaaS and health tech companies who have wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars in ad spend and insufficient marketing because of a lack of proper conversion tracking practices. The goal of this video is to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. And one of the big misconceptions that we see about conversion tracking that it only matters if you're running paid campaigns. And this couldn't be any farther from the truth. Whether your strategies relied on paid channels, organic, conversion tracking needs to be a critical part of your process. It not only guides marketing platforms on where to optimize your activities, but also heavily correlates with your overall revenue goals. So with that, let's dive into the guide. So really quickly, just to kick things off, for you to understand kind of who this is for. This is for founders and CEOs, marketing leaders, and drive deeper insights into your overall revenue driving activities for B2B SaaS and tech companies, and then companies currently running or plan on running any type of marketing campaigns. Kind of how we set this up is this guide is not meant for e-commerce companies, anyone that's doing B2C or D2C mobile apps, and generally any kind of brick and mortar or service-based businesses. Those types of companies have a little bit of different set of conversion tracking requirements, which we're not really gonna cover in this guide as it's purely meant for B2B companies. So as we dive into this guide, we've mapped it out into a couple of different sections. The first is gonna be about mapping your customer journey and the overall event journey. We wanna build your tracking dashboard. We wanna implement Google Tag Manager, as this is the core foundation for any successful event tracking platform. Google Analytics, followed by the Metapixel setup, LinkedIn Insights tag version 2.0, Google Ads Pixel setup, and then we'll take a little bit of a look into overall CRM integration, specifically with Hubspot. And then finally, with no marketing is complete without a mention of UTMs. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to effectively set up UTM tracking throughout all of your campaigns. So let's dive in from there. And to really kick off a successful event tracking program for any B2B companies, what's really critical is for you to map and understand your overall customer and event journey. And what I mean by that is really understanding where people are coming into your overall marketing funnel. What are the actions that they're taking, whether they are signing up for a newsletter, what pages are they viewing, are they signing up for a webinar? What are some of these more critical events as someone goes through the journey of being unaware of your product and eventually purchasing or becoming customers? So in this guide, we've identified some of the key events that we generally look for when setting up conversion tracking. Those are things like page views. So which pages are most frequently visited? Are there any specific products or services they're interested in? Form submissions. So are they filling out a contact form, feedback form, other kind of forms? We have webinar signups. So if you're running any kind of events or any kind of resources, we want to be able to know that what people are taking there. Newsletter, free trials. We want to make sure that we're tracking so we can have a better understanding of the overall activities that someone is taking before they become a customer. From there, once you've mapped out your overall customer journey of how folks are coming in, the actions they're taking at various stages, we want to dive into actually then creating an event tracking spec sheet. And so what this is a document that helps you identify all the key actions that someone can take, how these events are triggered. So if that's something on like a thank you page on a form submission or amount of time viewed on a page, whatever that trigger criteria is, we want to understand kind of the relevant pages, so where that event needs to take place, the overall channels. So if we're firing items back to Facebook, LinkedIn, or other ad platforms, and then have a spot to put the individual tracking codes or the items that we need in order to trigger those events. And so here's an example of a tracking guide that we use with all of our customers here at Mighty Orrett. And so like I mentioned, we have an option for the description, kind of what the event or action is. So in case of demo request, the event page where that event takes place. So on a demo/thank you, how that event is triggered or what the tracking code is installed with. So in this case, it's via Google Tag Manager. In the case of this Facebook pixel here, we actually have the Facebook pixel code, the initial code that's required, and an example of the specific event tracking code that's required to trigger this event. And then we like to do things like having options for the event status. So if it's been implemented, if there's issues, if there's warnings, and in this case, this one's yellow and it's saying this event is actually triggered via a successful form submission versus going to a thank you page. And so we've also added notes on here so we know we need to confirm the domain on Facebook. So this is really helpful so that way everyone on your team, so whether it's other marketers or developers, know the status of the specific events, how they're being tracked, And as new resources or tools or things are added, there's a central location to track how those events are being routed to all the various platforms that you may be using. So I'll drop a link to this guide in the description, but make sure to check out the bonus here, which is this conversion tracking and UTM template. Really helpful as you kind of go through this process of setting up the initial phases of creating a conversion tracking guide for your business. Moving on from there, one of the next critical pieces is going to be building your tracking dashboard. And so really important part of this is understanding the KPIs that you're trying to track for your business, and specifically for the events that you're trying to track. So if that's demos booked or meetings attended or the amount of page views or any kind of metrics like that, you want to be able to make sure that you are specifically tracking those in a manner that makes it easy for your team to understand and analyze that data, so that way you can actually act on it moving forward. And so some of the KPIs that we generally like to track are, page views, conversion rates for various activities. If there's a newsletter, kind of meetings booked, but ultimately we want to also make sure that we're very closely tracking revenue and being able to tie back revenue towards specific channels and activities. In addition, on a high level, you'd have things like ad spend, spend per channel or campaign, the number of leads, opportunities booked. And so overall, we just think it's very crucial that you have a key understanding of the KPIs that you're trying to track and monitor for your business. Moving on from there, we're big fans of using a visualization tool to really help see and make it easy to understand the changes in your KPIs and if they're trending upwards or downwards in a very quick and intuitive manner without having to dig through and compile a bunch of resources. So for this, we love tools like Hubspot has a very powerful dashboard builder, Google Looker Studio as well too, and then tools like DataBox make this process incredibly simple. So actually the dashboard that's shown here is a sample dashboard from DataBox. All right, so now that we've wrapped up talking about your customer journey, setting up your KPIs and your visual dashboards, now let's actually dive into the steps necessary to build out your conversion tracking process. Hey there, if you're a B2B SaaS or health tech company looking to drive qualified pipeline through demand generation and paid media, book a free 30-minute growth session with me so we can explore ways of how we can help you grow. And that's all going to start with Google Tag Manager. So Google Tag Manager is going to be your central hub for all of your event tracking. And it basically allows you to pull together all the tracking codes and events from Facebook, LinkedIn, other platforms, and tie them into one central place and then fire those events off and then send them back to those other tools. We're big fans of Google Tag Manager. It's our preferred platform for setting up conversion and event tracking and doing the routing for those events. And the reason why we love it so much is it helps to really consolidate all of your tracking codes into one seamless place. It's incredibly flexible in terms of how you get to trigger your events. We think it's pretty user-friendly, so you can bypass developer wait times in order to implement some of these events. And overall, fairly accurate in terms of how you trigger the events. To get started with Google Tag Manager, you're just going to go to marketingplatform.google.com and sign up to create your free account. Once you do that, you will then start the implementation process. It really starts with adding the Google Tag Manager event code to your website in the head and body. So you see an example of that kind of listed here. If you're using WordPress or Webflow or some of these other sites, it should have an option to allow you to embed these tracking codes on your page. If not, you should be able to use on your page. Once you're inside of Google Tag Manager, one of the recommended best practices that we like to do is make sure that you enable the built-in variables in Google Tag Manager. And to access that, you're just going to go to your main account. You're going to select on variables from the sidebar and then configure. We like to turn on all of the event, all of the form, and specifically most of the video built-in variables, as these will allow you to track more detailed user interactions with your site. So for example, with some of the video ones, you can track if someone starts, clicks, watches a certain percentage of a video, and then use that to fire and send back events back to Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Analytics to get some really deep insights on how people are interacting with the videos on your website. The next item that you're going to want to go through is setting up some of your initial triggers. And this is where the event spec tracking doc that we talked about earlier really comes into play, is having an understanding of what are the triggers that are going to be required in order for you to track the events you've deemed most critical for your business. And so in this example, the trigger is going to be someone visiting the page meeting-confirmation. Something to keep in mind if you're using HubSpot. HubSpot can be a little tricky in terms of tracking their form submissions through Google Tag Manager. The more advanced way to do it is to use something called a HubSpot form listener to do that. I'll include a link to a sample code in the comments. The alternative and the easier and what we generally recommend solution is to use a thank you page if you're trying to track events from HubSpot. From there, the next step of using the Google Tag Manager is going to be setting up the individual tags for each platform. So this is going to be the Facebook pixel. This is going to be your LinkedIn Insights tag. This is going to be your Google AdWords conversion tracking items. You're going to want to make sure you set each of those up and have the triggers. In this case, for a lot of these are going to be on all pages because you want them to track all the pages. And then you're going to work through setting up individual events for these as we kind of dive in some of the later chapters. And then one really powerful tool that we recommend is, if you're doing this on your own, is to make sure that you preview and debug any of the events that you set up or any of the tags, just to make sure that they're working correctly, they're firing accurately, and they're doing what you expect from them. So now that we've talked through setting up Google Tag Manager, now let's move on to setting up Google Analytics 4. Google Analytics 4, or GA4, is an incredibly powerful analytics tool. Google Analytics has become the default for a lot of companies when it comes to tracking their overall website analytics. Once again, to get started, you're just going to visit marketingplatform.google.com/analytics, and then sign up for a completely free account in order to get started. Once you do that, kind of some of the recommended best practices that we like to go through is make sure that you enable advanced categories. And so this will allow you to get even more specific events inside of GA4. So for example, we'll turn on page views, scrolls, outbound clicks, site search, video engagement, file downloads, form interactions, and more. So that way GA4 can natively track these events for you. After you've done that, it's now time to set up GA4 with Google Tag Manager. And to do that, it's actually fairly simple. You're just going to copy over your measurement ID. And once you have that, you'll create a new tag type. There's a Google Analytics 4 configuration tag type. You take that, you paste in your measurement ID, and then instead of doing all pages, one thing you want to be certain of is make sure that you select the option for initialization on all pages. And so the reason why you want to do this is that this will make sure that this executes before any other event or any other tags that get fired through Google Tag Manager. And then moving on from there, let's actually now dive into the actual event configuration for GA4. This will allow you to track specific user actions on your site, such as button clicks, form submissions. Part of this is going to be, we're going to reuse the event tracking spec that we talked about at the beginning of this video, so keep that handy. But inside of Google Tag Manager, you're going to define and manage your events. And you're going to create a new tag in GTM. You're going to select Google Analytics GA4 events, and then you're going to create your event firing triggers. So in this example, we're using the event trigger of meeting confirmation. So someone views the meeting confirmation page, that's going to trigger this event in GA4, where it's GA4 and the event name is called meeting booked. From there, another option that you have is to define those events inside of GA4 itself. So if you navigate to GA4 underneath conversions, you can then create kind of the meeting booked. You can give it the event name, page views, page locations, copy parameters in. And so one thing that you want to be certain of is whenever you're doing the new events inside of GA4 is that you actually go in and mark it as a conversion specific event like you see here, that forms of it. Otherwise, GA just sees it as a normal event and doesn't count it as a conversion event. And so we want to track conversion events for like these higher intent, higher value events that we want to make sure we're keeping a very close eye on. And so you can kind of see that example is listed here. So that's a quick overview of GA4. It obviously gets much more deeper, more complex, but that on a high level should give you kind of what you need to get started with GA4 UTM conversion tracking for your site. Now let's dive in and move in and talk about setting up Facebook Metapixel for event tracking. And so we've broken this down into 3 parts. It's getting started with the Meta business tools, actually getting the pixel installed and configured, and then finally using the pixel with Google Tag Manager. Yeah, to get started, you're just gonna go to business.facebook.com if you don't already have a business manager account, and then go through the setup process to get yourself started. Once that's done, you can now move forward in getting the Meta Pixel set up and integrated. So for the Meta Pixel installation configuration, we're gonna do this completely through Google Tag Manager. For the pixel installation and setup on your website, for the Meta Pixel installation and setup, this can be done in a couple of different ways, but one of those is through Google Tag Manager, through setting up the individual tags like we've talked about before. But there's also a couple of different other options as well too, depending on the platform that you're using, specifically for setting up the conversion API pixel. And so this allows for server-side tracking. So ever since the new iOS updates, the pixel-based tracking has lost some of its ability to be able to effectively track conversions. So what is recommended is using the actual conversion side API, which is a server-side tracking, offers more comprehensive data collection. And if you're using HubSpot, there's an option to set this up natively through HubSpot. If you go into marketing, ads, and then pixel setup, you'll see an option there to add your pixel and then to go through the process of doing the conversion API setup process. So this makes it much easier if you're using HubSpot. If you're using WordPress, there's a similar plugin that enables you to do this, and you'll just go get the Meta Pixel for WordPress plugin, go through and set up your options. So check your business manager account, your Facebook page, Instagram page, and that would automatically set up the conversion API process for you. So these are actually our recommended ways for, at least for Facebook, to set up the conversion API, in addition to using Google Tag Manager to set up the base Facebook pixel. So from there, now we can actually dive into talking about how to set up the actual specific event tracking for Facebook. And in this example, you're going to go inside of Google Tag Manager, you're going to create a new tag, and we recommend actually using a tag from the template gallery inside of Google Tag Manager. So on the top right, if you click on Discover More Tags in the Community Gallery Center, go through there, and if you actually search for the Facebook Pixel tag created by Facebook Archive, this is actually our recommended Facebook Pixel, because it actually has a lot of the standard events built in, so it makes it much easier for you to do these events on your own. So once installed, you're just gonna paste in your Facebook Pixel ID, which can be found if you're looking for where to find that. You can go to Business Manager, Events Manager, Data Sources, Pixel ID. And then from there, once you have that installed, once you have that selected, you can actually go through and pick the standard events that you want to use on your site. And so in this example, we have a standard event. I've called it lead. I have my pixels pasted in there, and I have my firing condition, which in this case, once again, is we're using the meeting confirmation as how we're going to fire off this specific Facebook event. And then once all that's done and you've set up the events with those platforms, you can actually go through and make sure that these events are firing and test that they are working inside of Facebook. And in addition to that, you want to make sure that once again, you're previewing these events and you make sure that they're firing via Google Tag Manager. So once again, in the preview tool for Tag Manager, we can see that this Facebook meeting event fired, and it fired 1 time from the Facebook pixel. And here's a tip for where event tracking really becomes powerful, especially on platforms like Facebook, is that you can actually optimize events for your campaigns based off of the events that were fired. So in this example that I'm showing here, we're actually going to create a custom audience based off of the event that's been fired, for this case, the lead. So we're going to create a custom audience of everyone that booked a meeting, pass that back into Facebook, and then from there we can do remarketing campaigns, we can create lookalikes, and we can basically find other people that are more likely to do a similar event. All right, so now let's dive into setting up the LinkedIn Insights 2.0 tag. And so it's very similar to Facebook, some of the other platforms. You're just going to go to the LinkedIn's campaign manager, sign up for an account. And once you're there, you'll then gain access to create your LinkedIn Insights 2.0 tag. So once again, with the LinkedIn 2.0 tag, we're going to use Google Tag Manager to set that up. And just like in the Facebook process, we're going to go to the Discovery Community template inside of Google Tag Manager. We're going to search for LinkedIn Insights tag 2.0. And once we have that, we're going to paste in our partner ID that we get from the LinkedIn Ads Manager. From there, we want to make sure that we set the tag to fire on all pages. So fairly simple process to set this up, but now we want to actually dive a little bit deeper and talk about the specific conversion event tracking within inside of LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a little bit different from the other platforms, is that you first actually have to create your event inside of LinkedIn before you can then bring it inside of Google Tag Manager. And so you're just going to navigate to LinkedIn Campaign Manager to define your conversion events. You're just going to log into LinkedIn Campaign Manager to create your events. So if you go into the back end, you click on Analyze, then Conversion Tracking, and then you create a conversion. And then for in this example, we're going to create an online conversion event. You're going to give your event a name. You're going to choose a primary conversion behavior, and then you're going to assign a dollar value to your event. So this is something that's often overlooked, but you want to make sure that you assign a dollar value. Specifically on LinkedIn, for each of your events, you're going to want to make sure that you set up a last touch each campaign and a last touch last campaign conversion event. The reason for this is that the path that someone takes before they convert is going to be varied, and we never know what specific ad that someone is going to convert on. So we want to make sure that we're tracking each conversion event that led someone to convert, and then we want to make sure that we're tracking the final event where someone decided to take action. So here in this example, we've set up to touch each campaign and the last campaign. And then something that we want to make sure that we're doing as well too is assigning a value. And so here, kind of in this example here, I've shown that we've assigned values to both the each and to the last, and we've assigned a higher dollar value to the last touch campaign as probably the most important. And so in the example of a demo booked, each value is probably worth $25 or $50 for someone to do that. But when someone actually converts and takes the demo, the last touch campaign, we want to set that at a higher value. And so in this case, it's worth $150 for us. So once you've set up the events inside of LinkedIn, you're now going to see this final screen here, and you're going to have an option to either set up the manual conversion or use a tag manager. We recommend using the tag manager. Select Google Tag Manager. And then from there, you're going to get your partner ID, have the option of selecting page load or event specific. In this case, we're going to use an event specific conversion. And you're going to be provided then with your conversion ID for Google Tag Manager. Take this code here, and then you'll bring that inside of Google Tag Manager. You're going to create a new LinkedIn Insights 2.0 tag. You're going to paste in your conversion ID and your partner ID along with the triggering event. And in this case, we're using a custom Hubspot request a quote event to then fire this and send this back off towards LinkedIn. And of course, like always, you're always going to want to make sure that you're testing your events on Google Tag Manager to make sure that they're firing accurately. So moving on from there, now let's dive in and talk about the Google Ads pixel setup. And as always, it's a simple process, but first you need to have your account set up. So just go to ads.google.com, create your account, and from there, we can dive into actually setting up the ads and conversion events. Once you are inside of your Google Ads account, you're just going to navigate to tools and the settings, and then click on measurements and then conversions, and then create a new conversion. You're going to paste in the name of your website in this example, myorrett.com, and you have the option to create a new conversion event. And similar to LinkedIn, we're going to want to go through the process of setting up the initial conversion activities. So finding a name, the goal, the value, go through kind of the source, how many times it can be counted, and set some of the attribution windows. And from there, underneath the tag setup options, we're going to click Use Google Tag Manager. We're going to copy over the conversion ID as well as the conversion label. And so we're going to keep that in mind for when we bring that over to Google Tag Manager. Now to set up Google Ads with Google Tag Manager, there's a couple of prerequisite steps that we need to take care of before we can use this. And the first is going to be using the Google Ads conversion linker tag. So once again, just go search for a new tag. You're going to search for Google Ads conversion linker. You're going to set the trigger to all pages. And from there, you have the first part done. From there, you need to go back then to Google Tag Manager, click under Google Ads conversion tracking. And now is where you're going to paste in your conversion ID and your conversion label, as well as define your triggering event. Once again, we're using meeting confirmation. Inside of Google Ads, under the conversion panel, you'll be able to see the actual conversion actions and items, and then you'll be able to see the status if it's active or inactive. And this automatically links to the Google Tag Manager preview and tester tool. So if you click on troubleshoot, it will actually just kind of show you and bring up the Google Tag Manager assistant, which will allow you to see if the event is firing correctly and help you to diagnose what may be going on. And so now the final part of this is setting up conversion tracking with your CRM. We're big fans of using HubSpot. We generally recommend this for almost all of our clients that we work with. We think it's probably the most user-friendly and has the simplest user interface that allows marketers and sales team and customer success team to all kind of work together under one central source of truth. To set up event tracking and to kind of tie this all in with HubSpot, we want to make sure that we have HubSpot integrated with all of your ad networks. And the great thing about setting up HubSpot with ad networks is you'll be able to quickly track and see what platforms, which channels, and which campaigns are responsible for bringing in leads, track the journey from lead to MQL, to SQL, to opportunities, won, loss, and eventually customers. So to do this, HubSpot has made this process incredibly simple to do. You're simply just going to log into HubSpot and navigate to settings, marketing, and then ads. From there, you're going to want to connect all of your desired ad platforms. You want to make sure that you have admin access to each of these platforms. So once you do that, so in this example, we're going to click on Facebook. Going to make sure that you enable for these auto tracking. So this will embed a UTM code on the back to make sure it ties the HubSpot events to your platform events. And then the additional items that we want to go through and make sure that we have turned on are lead syncing. So if you run any kind of lead gen forms on Facebook, Google Ads, or LinkedIn, these will automatically bring those leads into HubSpot and tie them directly towards the campaigns. And then something to keep in mind here is that HubSpot does give you the option to add the pixel directly via HubSpot. This is something that we generally don't recommend for most companies. We like using Google Tag Manager as kind of the central source of truth to help route these events to other platforms. If you use the setup via HubSpot, for example, you can't fire off an event and send it to an additional platform. There's a slight limitation and trade-off of keeping everything all inside of HubSpot versus having more flexibility and being able to offer a little bit more robust event tracking process if you do it through Google Tag Manager. And the final note that we want to keep in mind here is about using UTMs whenever you're doing event tracking and if you're running any kind of marketing campaigns as a whole. UTMs just allow you to get deeper insights into overall traffic sources and campaigns so that way you can tie this back to your CRM and revenue. Overall, we think using UTMs throughout this entire process of conversion and event tracking is a critical component, and it's why we've included as part of this guide not only our event tracking spec sheet but also our UTM creation guide. So that way, whenever you're creating events on any of these platforms, whether they be Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Ads, TikTok, or anything else, you want to make sure that the URLs that you're providing have the UTM codes on there so you can track the campaign, the source, the medium, and any specific event or content details, have that tied directly back to your campaigns. So this is an example of a UTM tracking guide that we use with all of our clients, and we have a column for notes, something to kind of keep general information about what is related to this UTM and this URL. We have the original or the source URL. We have a link for the campaign, the source. So in this case, it's social, but it could be LinkedIn. So if this could be my Facebook profile. Short links if you're using something like Bitly. And then we have the final UTM added URL. And so one key thing to keep in mind when using UTMs is that they are case sensitive. So like I have here in my note, Facebook with a capital F is not equal to Facebook with a lowercase f. These will be counted as two separate sources or two separate mediums. So you want to make sure to always have consistency in your naming conventions. So if it's always lowercase, always use lowercase. If it's always uppercase, always use uppercase. And having a UTM spec document like this allows you to have much cleaner UTM tracking parameters. So there you have it. That is our guide to B2B conversion tracking and how we like to think of this process whenever we work with clients. Once again, conversion tracking is a foundational piece of effective marketing. Without appropriate conversion tracking in place, you could be losing money, losing insights into where your best performing marketing activities are coming from. And without a proper conversion tracking and event tracking in place, you're actually running your marketing blind. So don't let this be you. Don't let this be you. So use the guide and the resources that are provided below and that are linked in this comment section to help you do overall better, more effective marketing and help you grow your company. Have a good one. Peace.